CRA alert. Why 500,000 seniors will miss the bill C-19 top-up next month. There is a payment coming. For hundreds of thousands of Canadian seniors, it was supposed to arrive next month. A top-up, a supplement, an additional layer of financial support tied directly to legislation that was passed by the federal government. Legislation that many Canadians were told would protect the most vulnerable retirees in this country. But for approximately 500,000 seniors, that payment will not come. Not because they don't qualify in spirit, not because they aren't struggling, and not because the government canceled the program. It will not come because of something far quieter than a policy cancellation, something far more frustrating than an outright reversal. It will not come because of how the Canada Revenue Agency, the CRA, has interpreted the eligibility rules attached to this top-up payment, and because of how the income reporting system that governs old age security, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, and related federal senior benefits has interacted with the data that was used to determine who receives this money and who does not. My name is Joseph, and today, we are going to walk through exactly what is happening with the Bill C-19 top-up, why a significant portion of Canada's senior population is being excluded from a payment many of them genuinely need, what the financial impact looks like on the ground, and critically, what steps you or someone you love can take right now to understand your situation and protect your retirement income. This is not a story about political scandal. This is a story about policy mechanics, about how a well-intentioned benefit can leave real people behind when the fine print doesn't match the reality of how Canadian seniors actually live. Stay with me. This matters. To understand what is happening right now, we need to step back to 2022. In June of that year, the federal government passed Bill C-19, the Budget Implementation Act, 2022, number 1. Embedded within that legislation was a one-time top-up payment to the Canada Housing Benefit. But more relevant to today's discussion, it also included a direct, one-time supplement targeted at low-income seniors who were receiving the Guaranteed Income Supplement, or GIS, and who had seen their benefits reduced or clawed back as a result of pandemic-related income, specifically the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, better known as CERB, and other COVID-19 income supports. Now, the reason this becomes complicated is important to understand. The GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, is a non-taxable monthly payment provided to low-income old age security recipients. It is income tested. That means the amount you receive is determined by how much other income you reported in the previous year. During the pandemic, hundreds of thousands of Canadian seniors collected CERB or other emergency benefits to survive. That was income. And when the CRA processed their tax returns and calculated their GIS entitlements for the following benefit year, that pandemic income counted against them. It reduced their GIS payments. For seniors already living on the margins, many receiving between $800 and $400 per month in combined OAS and GIS, even a modest reduction of $50 to $150 per month was devastating. The government recognized this. The top-up payment under Bill C-19's framework was meant, at least in part, to address that damage, to compensate seniors who lost GIS income because of emergency benefits they had received in good faith during one of the most disruptive periods in modern Canadian history. That was the intention. The problem, and this is where we are today, is in the execution, and specifically, in which seniors the CRA system identifies as eligible, and which seniors fall through the gaps in that identification process. Let's be precise about what the top-up structure involves, and why eligibility is proving to be a barrier for so many. The federal government, through Service Canada and the CRA, administers GIS based on your reported net income from the prior tax year. The system is largely automated. When you file your taxes, or when the CRA uses information it already has on file, your GIS amount for the upcoming benefit year is calculated accordingly. The one-time top-up payments associated with pandemic-era GIS reductions were also processed through this automated system. That means eligibility was largely determined by whether your tax data clearly showed a reduction in GIS tied specifically to COVID-19 emergency income. Here is where the problem begins. First, not all seniors file taxes on time or at all. A significant number of low-income seniors, particularly those whose only income is OAS and GIS, may not realize they need to file a tax return to maintain or adjust their benefit entitlements. Others filed late. Some had errors in their filings. In each of these cases, the CRA's automated eligibility check may not have captured them correctly. Second, there are seniors whose pandemic income came not from CERB directly, but from provincial support programs, employment income they earned briefly, or other sources that interacted with GIS calculations in ways that weren't neatly categorized under the federal government's top-up eligibility criteria. Third, and this is significant, there is a population of seniors who did experience real GIS reductions during the pandemic period, but whose income data, as processed by the CRA, did not generate an automatic flag for the top-up. Perhaps their reduction appeared modest on paper. Perhaps there were data discrepancies between provincial and federal records. Perhaps they simply were not in the system in a way that triggered the payment. The result is that an estimated 500,000 seniors, and that number comes from advocacy and policy estimates, not from a formal government disclosure, are expected to either not receive the top-up they may be entitled to, receive a reduced amount, or receive no communication whatsoever from the CRA explaining why they were excluded. The payment is not being canceled. It is being missed. And for many seniors, the difference between those two things is invisible until the month passes and the money doesn't arrive. Let's talk about who we are actually discussing here, because this is not an abstract policy issue. These are real Canadians with real financial constraints. The seniors most at risk of missing this top-up fall into several categories. The first group is seniors who are sole recipients of OAS and GIS, typically individuals over the age of 65 with little to no private pension, no significant RRSP savings, and no employment income. These are Canadians who depend almost entirely on federal benefit programs for their monthly survival. Many are women. Many are widowed. Many live alone. A missed payment of even $200 to $500 is not an inconvenience for this group. It is a genuine crisis in household budgeting. The second group is seniors who collected any form of COVID-19 emergency income, CERB, CRB, CRSB, or provincial equivalents, and who did not receive clear communication from the government at the time that doing so could affect their GIS entitlements in the following benefit year. These individuals acted in good faith. They collected support that was available to them during an emergency, and then they were penalized through the income testing mechanism, often without fully understanding why their GIS had changed. The third group is near retirees and recent retirees Canadians who entered the OAS and GIS system in 2021, 2022, or 2023, and whose baseline benefit calculations were affected by pandemic year income. These individuals may be less familiar with how the GIS system works, may have had working income during part of the pandemic, and may not realize that their current benefit levels reflect a distorted income picture from an extraordinary period. And the fourth group, often overlooked, is seniors who have a trusted family member, adult child, or community worker helping them navigate their finances, but where that helper is not a registered tax professional and may not know what questions to ask the CRA or Service Canada on their behalf. Across all four groups, the common thread is this: they are not well positioned to identify the problem, advocate for themselves through formal government channels, or access information that isn't proactively communicated to them. Let's put real numbers around what is at stake. The one-time top-up payments tied to pandemic-era GIS reductions ranged in value depending on individual circumstances, but estimates from policy analysts and advocacy organizations place typical payments in the range of $500 to $2,400 for the most affected seniors, with the average falling somewhere around $1,000 to $1,200 for those who experience the most significant GIS reductions. For a senior living on approximately $1,500 to $1,800 per month in combined OAS and GIS, which represents a realistic income picture for a significant portion of Canada's low-income senior population, a missed top-up payment of $1,000 represents more than half a month's income. Consider what that means practically. Prescription medications, rent, groceries, utility bills during a Canadian winter. These are not optional expenses. And in a period when inflation has driven the cost of food, housing, and energy to levels not seen in decades, the purchasing power of a fixed senior income has already been eroded substantially. Beyond the one-time top-up itself, there is a compounding concern. Seniors who were never properly notified that their GIS was reduced, or who didn't understand the mechanism, may also have missed the window to request a reassessment or submit updated income information to Service Canada. That means the financial gap isn't just about the top-up. It's about potentially years of modestly reduced GIS payments that were never corrected. Over a 36-month period, a GIS reduction of $100 per month, which is well within the range that pandemic income could have caused, represents $3,600 in lost income. That is not a trivial figure for someone living at or near the low-income threshold. It would be unfair and inaccurate to characterize this situation as deliberate government neglect. The policy intent behind the Bill C-19 provisions was genuine. There was a recognized problem, and there was a legislative attempt to address it. But intent and execution are two different things, and the pattern we are seeing here reflects a structural tension that has existed in Canadian senior benefit administration for years. The GIS system was designed in an era when income patterns were relatively stable and predictable. A retired Canadian in the 1980s or 1990s typically had employment income, then CPP, then OAS, and GIS, in a clear sequence. The income testing mechanism worked reasonably well for that profile. It was not designed to handle the kind of income volatility that a global pandemic introduced. Emergency payments, employment interruptions, partial work, provincial supplements. These variables entered the system and interacted with GIS calculations in ways that created widespread unintended consequences. The government's fiscal situation also plays a role in this story. Canada's federal deficit, demographic pressure from an aging population, and the sustained cost of expanded senior benefits have all created pressure to manage program expenditures carefully. That pressure does not automatically translate into cutting benefits, but it does translate into systems that apply eligibility criteria strictly, that rely on automation rather than case-by-case review, and that place the burden of awareness and advocacy on the recipient rather than the program administrator. In that environment, the seniors who are best informed, most digitally connected, and most capable of navigating bureaucratic processes receive what they are entitled to. The seniors who are least equipped to do those things, often the most vulnerable, do not. That is not a scandal, but it is a serious and ongoing policy failure that deserves public attention. Advocacy organizations focused on Canadian seniors, including groups like the National Seniors Council, various provincial seniors advocacy coalitions, and anti-poverty organizations, have been raising concerns about GIS clawback issues and pandemic-era benefit reductions for several years now. The core argument from these organizations has been consistent. The federal government needs to do more than pass legislation. It needs to implement proactive outreach to ensure that eligible seniors actually receive what they are entitled to. Legislation that requires seniors to self-identify, self-advocate, and navigate complex CRA processes is legislation that will fail the most vulnerable by design. Several economists and policy researchers who have studied Canada's senior benefit architecture have noted that the income testing mechanism for GIS, while fiscally logical, is poorly suited to absorbing income shocks. They have called for reforms that would include provisions to exclude extraordinary one-time income events like pandemic emergency payments from GIS calculations altogether, rather than relying on compensatory top-ups that are themselves subject to eligibility complications. There has also been frustration expressed by tax professionals and financial advisors who work with low-income seniors. A recurring theme in that professional community is that CRA communications to seniors are often technical, infrequent, and delivered through channels mail, online portals, formal notices that many seniors either don't monitor closely or don't fully understand. The public response to these concerns has been limited in visibility, in part because the seniors most affected are not a politically active demographic in the traditional sense. They are not organizing protests or generating viral social media content. They are, in many cases, quietly absorbing financial reductions they may not fully understand and hoping that things improve. If you are a Canadian senior, a family member of a senior, or a professional who works with retirees, there are specific steps worth taking right now before the next benefit cycle passes. The first step is to verify your current GIS amount and compare it to previous years. You can do this through your My Service Canada account online or by calling Service Canada directly. If your GIS payment changed between 2021 and 2023, and you received any COVID-19 related income during that period, you should ask Service Canada specifically whether your account was reviewed for pandemic-related GIS reduction adjustments. The second step is to ensure your tax filings are current and complete. If you or someone you know has not filed a tax return for 2020, 2021, 2022, or 2023, that needs to be addressed immediately. The CRA offers the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program, CVITP, which provides free tax preparation assistance to eligible Canadians, including seniors with modest incomes. Unfiled returns are one of the most common reasons seniors miss benefits they are legally entitled to. The third step is to request a formal review if you believe your GIS was reduced due to pandemic income and you have not received any compensatory payment or adjustment. Service Canada and the CRA have formal reconsideration processes. These processes take time, but they exist. Document your income history, gather your notices of assessment for relevant years, and submit a written inquiry. The fourth step, and this one is often overlooked, is to contact a local community legal clinic or seniors advocacy organization if you are not sure how to proceed. Many provinces have free services specifically designed to help low-income seniors navigate federal benefit issues. These services can make a significant difference in outcomes. And finally, mark important dates. The GIS benefit year runs from July to June, with income reassessment based on the prior calendar year's tax return. Understanding that timeline is essential for knowing when changes will take effect and when to take action. Looking ahead, there are several developments worth monitoring closely. The federal government has signaled, through various budget documents and policy statements, an ongoing commitment to senior income security. But commitment at the level of policy intent does not automatically translate into systems that reach every eligible person. The administrative infrastructure, the CRA, Service Canada, the data sharing arrangements between federal and provincial programs will determine whether future enhancements to senior benefits actually land in the hands of the people they are designed for. There is also a broader demographic reality bearing down on this system. As Canada's baby boomer generation moves deeper into retirement, the number of Canadians relying on CPP, OAS, and GIS will continue to grow substantially over the next decade. The pressure on these programs, both in terms of fiscal cost and administrative capacity, will intensify. How the government responds to that pressure will define retirement security for millions of Canadians. Advocates are pushing for systemic reforms, including automatic enrollment improvements, simplified income reporting processes for seniors, and clearer communication standards from federal benefit administrators. Whether those reforms gain traction in the current fiscal environment remains to be seen. What is clear is that Canadians who are approaching retirement or who are already in it cannot afford to be passive about this. The system, as designed, rewards those who are informed and engaged. It does not reliably seek out those who are not. Staying informed about changes to CPP contribution rules, OAS deferral options, GIS eligibility criteria, and CRA reporting requirements is not optional for anyone serious about retirement security. It is foundational. Let me leave you with this. The situation we have discussed today is not a dramatic headline. It is not a sudden reversal or a crisis announcement. It is something quieter and, in some ways, more troubling. A gap between what was promised and what will actually be delivered playing out in the monthly bank accounts of hundreds of thousands of Canadian seniors who have no particular way of knowing it is happening. The 500,000 seniors who may miss this top-up are not victims of bad intentions. They are, in many cases, victims of a system that was not built to find them and that will not always tell them when something they are owed is not arriving. That is why this channel exists. That is why this conversation matters. If you found this analysis useful, I would ask that you share it with a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor, a colleague approaching retirement. The information we have covered today is not complicated once it is laid out clearly, but it is not information that will come looking for you. Subscribe to this channel if you want to stay ahead of the policy changes, CRA rule updates, and senior benefit developments that affect your financial future. Leave a comment below if you have questions about your own situation, or if you have experienced issues with GIS, OAS, or CRA communications. I read the comments, and your questions help shape future content. The system belongs to all Canadians. Understanding it is the first step to making it work for you. I'm Joseph. Thank you for watching.